Good evening. I'm going to call to order the September 9th, 2025 meeting of the Policy and Services Committee. Would you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Liu,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pinker,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. And do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
We do not have any requests to speak.
Okay. Terrific. All right. Well, then we can move forward with our first action item. Action item. Office of the City Auditor presentation of the Dispatch Center assessment. So looks like we have Ms. Murdoch online. Welcome.
Good evening, committee members. Thank you. Kate Murdoch, City Auditor. I will be presenting the results of the Dispatch Center assessment. I want to thank both the fire and police departments for their support in conducting this assessment, but I especially want to thank the Dispatch Center management and staff for their time and assistance. Next slide, please. Before we get into the results of this assessment, I want to highlight that this was not an audit project and did not follow a typical audit process. The city and police and fire departments had specific questions they asked the audit office to answer, as well as specific service metrics they wanted benchmarked. The assessment's primary focus was to provide information on 4 areas of dispatch performance: staffing, call processing, emergency medical dispatching or EMD, and training. The report offers up observations of the current state of services at the time of the assessment, as well as considerations for future decision making. Next slide, please. The city operates a 24-hour dispatch center, which is run by the Palo Alto Police Department's Communications Division. Also known as a Public Safety Answering Point, or PSAP, the city's center receives and dispatches calls for police, fire, utilities, public works, animal control, and also mans the city's 24-hour non-emergency line. In addition, the city's PSAP serves as Stanford's call center, dispatching police and fire services for the university. In 2023, Palo Alto's PSAP received over 145,000 calls. Next slide, please. The first performance area the auditor's office evaluated was the PSAP staffing. We evaluated current and alternative methodologies for determining appropriate staffing levels, explored how changes to the staffing structure might impact the PSAP, and how the PSAP is performing on key call answering metrics. Overall, we found that the PSAP's budgeted staffing level of 20 dispatchers is in line with industry standards, but that the PSAP has often been unable to fill all budgeted positions. This is an issue that several benchmarking agencies also reported. At the time of the assessment, Palo Alto's PSAP had 17 dispatchers. We also noted that the city's agreement with the Service Employees International Union requires that the PSAP is staffed with a minimum of 4 dispatchers from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 3 dispatchers from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. Based on staffing guidelines from the National Emergency Number Association, the city needs 20 dispatchers to meet the union's minimum staffing requirements. Finally, we met with stakeholder departments and other agencies receiving dispatching services, and overall their feedback was positive, with users remarking on dispatchers' professionalism and knowledge of Palo Alto and its services. Stakeholders also mentioned some areas for improvement, including providing more detailed information to the responding agency. In terms of next steps, the city may want to consider conducting a staffing utilization assessment and work with stakeholders to better understand their dispatch needs. Next slide, please. The second area evaluated was call processing. There are several metrics that can be assessed here, but we primarily looked at 2 metrics. First, the time it takes for a dispatcher to answer a call from the first ring. The National Emergency Number Association standard for PSAPs is to answer 90% of all 911 calls within 15 seconds or less, and the city's PSAP is far exceeding this goal, answering more than 99% of calls within 10 seconds or less. Another metric we looked at is the National Fire Protection Agency's standard related to call processing time. It is important to note that this is not currently an established performance goal for the city's PSAP, but is a metric that the fire department tracks and would like included in PSAP's performance goals. This standard requires PSAPs to process or dispatch 90% of calls within 90 seconds. Palo Alto dispatched 68% of calls within 90 seconds in 2024. This presents an area for improvement. While the city has a quality assurance process for reviewing emergency medical dispatch calls, we noted it does not have a formal quality assurance process for reviewing and providing feedback to dispatchers on other calls received. Staff stated that with current staffing levels, they do not have the ability to review all of the different types of calls they receive. This is something the city might explore implementing in the future. Next slide, please. The third area we evaluated was emergency medical dispatch, also known as EMD. EMD is a structured protocol for answering medical calls received by PSAPs. By following an approved series of questions, the dispatcher is able to quickly determine the nature and priority of the call, dispatch the appropriate response agency, and provide pre-arrival instructions to the caller to help the patient until emergency medical services can arrive. All of Palo Alto's dispatchers are trained in EMD. Overall, we determined that the city's PSAP is compliant with many EMD standards, but these processes are not formalized with the recommended standard operating procedures. In terms of monitoring quality assurance and how these critical calls are handled by dispatchers, the PSAP began outsourcing review of these calls to a third-party vendor in the fall of 2024, as management did not have the bandwidth to perform this function. The vendor determined that the PSAP's overall performance score meets standards. OCA also tested a sample of calls to see if calls were accurately coded in the city system. We found that all EMD coded calls had the right code assigned. However, a small percent of calls we sampled that had a no EMD coding, which means that the dispatcher could not provide or follow emergency medical dispatch protocols, should have been coded as EMD, which is important in relaying information to responders. We did note that EMD was performed or partially performed on all of these calls, and it was just the coding that was wrong. Of the calls that we sampled that were coded with NA or not applicable, we found that 70% should have been coded with no EMD and 20% should have been coded as EMD. Overall, we observed that the accuracy for coding EMD calls is improving as the number of calls coded as not applicable reduced significantly from 2023 to 2024. PSAP management stated that they now review all calls coded as not applicable to provide coaching and to ensure that calls are coded appropriately. The city might consider formalizing EMD standards and implementing a more formal feedback structure for dispatcher performance. In addition, adopting specific performance goals in relation to EMD for the agency and individual dispatchers could further help improve performance. Next slide, please. The final area we evaluated was training. OCA found that the city's PSAP has a comprehensive training manual, and all dispatchers were in compliance with continuing professional training requirements. As noted through the evaluation of other areas, the city has begun formally evaluating EMD calls, but does not have a formal process for evaluating dispatcher performance on other calls. This is something for the city to consider implementing in the future. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, City Auditor. This is such an important service the city provides. Is there anything else from staff? No? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have any public comment on item 1.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, then let's bring it back to the committee. Do either of my colleagues have comments or questions? You go ahead, Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report. Just a few questions. I was a little confused about how we would implement the recommendation of eliminating duplicate incidents during emergency events. I would imagine that is an issue that all dispatch centers deal with in an emergency event. But how do we mitigate that? Because we encourage people to call in. So I'm curious. And if we are able to, are we then taking that recommendation and trying to implement something?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Moore. I'm with the police department. I'm the public safety communications manager. So oftentimes we do get duplicate calls, for example, during storms. Usually if a dispatcher takes a call, they'll process the call, and if another person is taking it at the same time, that the original dispatcher enters the call, it'll create a duplicate one. As soon as it's duplicated, they'll duplicate cancel it. So it'll smush all the information into one call. So we do have a method for that.
Okay, so I guess is that seems like the audit found that, or at least is recommending that we improve that process? Is that
My
the-
understanding was that it was feedback from stakeholders.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, appreciate that clarification. And then I think probably another question
Sure.
for you. I think both of them are going to be then for you.
Okay.
Why are we 22% under NFPA standards for dispatch time on calls? I mean, we were so good in other areas that were audited. Why are we struggling in that area?
In the NFPA?
Yeah,
That's not something that we currently follow.
okay,
We follow the NINA standards, and that's for answering calls, but not call processing. Call processing can be, how do I explain? So call processing is the way you get a call. Someone's giving you an address or a location, and there are different factors that affect call processing. So if someone's not a non-native English speaker, we have to get a translator. Someone can't give us their location. So NINA doesn't have a formal call processing time, which is why we don't have a processing time.
so is there a way to assess how quickly we are dispatching based off of, I understand there are these kind of exigent circumstances that, yeah, we're not going to be able to dispatch quickly, but
Council member, if I might just also add, I think to Lindsay's point, we don't necessarily currently, we haven't adopted NFPA as our standard to her point, but what staff's expecting prospectively is to at least track our call processing prospectively, benchmarking against this, but ultimately establishing what we think internally would be a compliance standard for all the peace out partners. So, an accredited agency for NFPA, similar to, if you were an accredited public works or other, obviously requires a certain level of resources to meet those expectations. And so I think this assessment brought the benchmark to light, but we'll start tracking information now prospectively to look at that.
great. Okay, perfect. That's what I want to know. So we're going to start collecting the information, then we can assess when we have more data on how well we're doing and how we can make those improvements.
Right.
And then there was the issue about no formal questions for calls. Is that being developed?
No formal questions.
And then
So we do have
I can
formal
pull it up.
questions that we ask for EMD. They're a standard set of questions.
not for EMD.
Okay.
It was. Yeah, under call processing, slide 5, current state observations, the third bullet point, the dispatch center lacks a formal QA process for general
Oh.
call processing.
Quality assurance, yes. So we don't currently have a quality assurance program for general calls. We do have one for EMD, but we don't have one for, say, utility calls, animal control calls. That's something that we welcome. We just don't have the bandwidth with staffing to monitor the quality assurance. Our supervisors work side by side with our dispatchers. So they provide, hands-on quality assurance as the calls come in, but we don't have a formalized process.
Okay, so something that recognized should be developed if staffing and resources are
Absolutely.
available.
Yes,
Appreciate it. I think that'd be a conversation then for another time.
thank you.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Lou, do you have anything?
Yeah, thank you. And Councilmember Stone asked several of my questions. I really appreciate this audit. It's really detailed. It's great to see the comparison metrics. And it's great to see all the wins and successes of our dispatch process. My sense is just that is mainly that the NFPA is the main sort of metric improvement that we can make. I understand that we are going to begin tracking it. I just want to confirm my understanding from a couple places in the report. So we are not meeting the NFPA standards, but how atypical is that? It seems like in at least a couple of references that maybe the median is somewhere off the standard. But I think there's also reference to Alameda meeting the standard or being closer to it. So is there an intuition or like a walkthrough of how to interpret how big the gap is for NFPA?
Kate, do you have any intel on how widespread NFPA is and as an adopted standard?
That's a great question. I think with smaller PSAPs, such as Palo Alto's, it's probably not as common. Our attention was drawn to that particular standard by the fire chief. So that was information that we were specifically asked to look at. I can say from the study that I reviewed, and I can get you more specific numbers, but don't have them at the moment on me, but it was indicated that there are not many PSAPs that are, especially that are not accredited and don't have those additional resources that are meeting that standard.
Okay. And so just from my intuition, what is the kind of training or process to meet that standard more quickly? It's not that our dispatchers are asking questions or getting information more slowly than other dispatchers, right? Is it more about like the script we use, the I don't know, the complexity of our calls? I know we did say that we would investigate this and fully understand this, but just ahead of that, is there any intuition?
I'm not sure I'm fully following the question. Is the question, how do we get there? Or why are we not there?
Why are we not there?
I think we're not there because it hasn't been set that this is our policy target and our policy goal. I think a choice like that is a choice that we can make as an organization if we want to become accredited, if we want to reach these standards. And I think in order to do that, we, as the public safety communications team has alluded to, I think we would need additional resources in order to accomplish that. That doesn't mean, though, that we can't continue to track, or rather start and prospectively track our response times in alignment with that and see what progress we can make in the absence of adding additional resources through training or any other process improvements that we may be able to put in place as we've outlined in this assessment, right? The stronger manuals, the quality assurance checking, and having that more consistent review and feedback loop on performance. And so I think we would start there before we moved towards, okay, we can make X amount of improvement, and in order to get the final margin, maybe we would need more resources.
Right. And so we don't know whether it's a performance issue or just something about the complexity of our calls or something like that.
I'm sure it's an amalgamation of all, right?
Yeah.
You think about when someone is calling into a 911 center, they are literally in crises. And so I'm sure or rather I know that, and as Kate's team was reviewing these, you have a varying level of information. And I think there is an aspect of training on our end to make sure that we are training all of our dispatchers and then also quality checking their work. And then I also think there's, as Lindsay identified, these are going to be tough calls at sometimes.
Yeah. So we can start tracking this metric, but deeper analysis will, it seems, require one additional FTE. Is that right?
I think what we were trying to identify, and I think there's just some level of, remember, the PSAP is operating 24/7. So if you're talking about one additional dispatcher, that's typically more than one FTE to cover that full 24-hour period, obviously. You know, as an example, fires on 3 shifts. And so there's that aspect. But the other piece of it, when I think there's talking about 1 FTE, is also about having more quality assurance in-house.
Right.
And so that was the 1 FTE there is talking about, as Lindsay just described, we would need to have enough resources to pull our supervisors and management off of answering the dispatch calls. So they could be doing the quality assurance, but obviously those calls need to go somewhere. So that's where you would need either a untied down supervisor or another dispatcher, right, to relieve that volume. When you have a supervisor that's both taking calls and doing the review, doesn't quite work.
Yeah, thank you for walking through that. I think obviously right now, FTE headcount is difficult. I would love if it were possible for a supervisor to take, 20% time, 10% time over the course of several months to really get an intuition of the problem and or whether there even is a problem on NFPA or whether there even is an actual problem with any of the other standards or processes. And then maybe we can take a more detailed recommendation on whether to add that FTE in the next budget cycle.
Absolutely. And just to lift up, I think, where public safety, both fire, PD, and the team is at, is they are meeting now on, not now, but they have been meeting on a monthly basis to go over kind of expectations, quality assurance. We've got the contractor who's now helping bolster our audit, our staff, so that we can do more quality assurance testing. It's just not going to, it still won't be at that higher level that the assessment identified.
Got it. Yeah, from my perspective, it's hard to know if we need that FTE, but hopefully we'll, start tracking the metrics and have that context for the next budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking Ms. Moore and the team that does this work. As was mentioned, this is difficult work, I'm sure, and just constantly dealing with people in trauma, taking some of that on. Of course, you can't help but when you're in that situation. So we're very grateful to those of you who work to make that happen for our residents. Actually, this may relate to the quality of the services and enabling meeting whatever standard we end up adopting. Do we have resources for the people that staff the dispatch center in terms of taking care of them having to deal with all of this every day?
Help.
Whoever wants to answer that.
Hi again. Yes, we have a peer support team. I'm one of the members, and one of our dispatchers is also one of the members. We have extensive wellness training that happens throughout the year. We talk about each other, talk about debriefs if we have difficult calls. We're always made aware if something difficult happens. So we have a really good support system. We have a great center. They're great people. They love what they do. They love the community. And it shows because we have a lot of them here for a very long time.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that and excited to hear that. And, it seems like this work would attract and benefit from mission-driven people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another just aside, but again, just thinking about the environment in which this work gets done,
Mm-hmm.
and is there any perhaps positive impact of having a new public safety building in which to work? Because I saw that dispatch center. It is pretty nifty. And so is that having any impact?
Yes, everyone's very excited. I've been here 17 years without windows, and we're so excited to have natural sun, like ecstatic. So the lighting alone is going to boost morale.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that, because anything we can do to help people who are doing this blessed work is terrific. So
thank you so much.
But I want to go back to this question that the assistant city manager was speaking with my colleague about these NFPA standards. If the purpose of tracking is partly to work toward the standard, and we would have a choice about that policy goal, I guess I'd like to understand a little bit about, why. Like, I mean, obviously we want to be as excellent as we can be. Obviously, we just heard how much these people care. I just want to know, would there be do we think there would be a real world difference? And if so, can you characterize it if we were to adopt that policy and were to try to track and work toward that? What would be the impact?
Ooh, I may need the public safety professionals to help us out here a bit, and Kate as well. But I think, when we're talking about especially medical calls, I think what you would hear from most, if not all professionals, is every second counts. And so every second we can be faster in our response to get to that call to that person in need, the better chance we have at being able to help them in that moment. That being said, there are factors that go into that, and policy, resource, all of the above decisions, both factors we can control and factors that we can't, that will impact our ability to reach the individual in need.
Sure. And thank you for that, because I wanted to bring out, that's the real reason for doing this. I mean, certifications are nice and various things, but it's what you all in uniform there do every day for us, that's really the goal here. So, assessing whether we need to provide more resources to support that is something I would I definitely support. It seems that a lot of these recommendations are really around feedback procedures, quality assurance and such. And it sounds like that from these meetings, that looking at those and addressing them is somewhat underway already. Am I getting the right impression there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the next steps are to, one, both continue that coordination, but two, as we outlined in that management response, continue to work towards establishing a metric to be working towards, basically, associated with the PSAP, focusing, frankly, on medical calls. As you can kind of see in this assessment, one of the reasons for this, just to provide full context, is, medical calls are going to become increasingly important as we look at a single role. And so as we're looking at service delivery changes, that impacts the ripple effect of how do we support those service delivery changes, and wanting to make sure that we are looking, from start to finish, what is necessary in order to implement those in the most successful way we can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like we're doing pretty well, but by being more introspective, by taking the feedback, by looking at the quality assurance parameters and training, also, that we can just increase that degree of excellence, and that effort is ongoing. And we'll see if we want to adopt the actual metric and work toward that. Okay, that's terrific. Is there anything else we should know? Anything else you want to mention that or lift up that hasn't come out yet?
If I might add one thing to the discussion about getting feedback, in my discussions with the third-party vendor who is looking at the EMDQ calls, providing EMDQ, they did indicate that they can also start providing feedback in relation to that NAFPD metric. So ways to process the call more efficiently, basically. So that might be another avenue to explore in terms of getting that information and kind of identifying and pinpointing areas to improve.
That's great. I see our assistant city manager nodding. So that's terrific. That's all I have. Do my colleagues have anything more? No. All right. Well, thank you again for what you do every day. And thank you for being here tonight with us. We really appreciate that. So carry on. All right. So, do we need a motion to recommend? Okay.
Yes, we'll send it to council. Thank you.
You don't need a motion?
I said, yes, please
Oh,
motion so we
yes,
can
I
send it to
thought so.
council. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'll move we recommend approval of the of the city auditor presentation of the dispatch center assessment.
Thank you. And since my mic is on, I will second.
Second.
No. I'll second.
Councilmember Lou,
Yes.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Vinker,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Thank you for the assist, Councilmember Stone. All right. Let's move on to item 2, review onboarding practices for boards, commissions, and committees. And welcome. Are you doing the staff report tonight?
Good evening, Vice Mayor, council members. Francesca Reyes, Deputy City Clerk. So tonight will be Tonight, I will be reporting updates to our onboarding practices for our BCCs and providing you with the most recent version of the BCC handbook, which was included as the attachment A. So tonight's item is brought to you, well, at least it was requested back in February 2024. The council referred the BCC handbook and the onboarding process to the Policy and Services Committee for review. Since then, we've taken a closer look at how we welcome our new commissioners and made several updates both to the process and the handbook, just to make sure that it reflects the council's directions and current best practices. We've collaborated with department heads and staff liaisons on alignment of onboarding processes. And so the onboarding experience for new BCC members is designed to be supportive, clear, and consistent. Commissioner onboarding takes place in 2 phases. First, the city clerk's office leads the first phase, which covers general information and requirements relevant to all boards and commission. We actually do that in partnership with the city attorney's office as well. The second phase is led by the commission's staff liaisons and covers information specific to the commission, such as the work plan, upcoming agenda topics, and guiding documents. So the city clerk's office manages the initial first phase with the city attorneys. It includes 5 required steps commissioners must complete before they can participate in meetings, which is the oath of office, completing the Form 700, the ethics and anti-harassment training, attesting to the BCC handbook that they've reviewed it, and also the orientation sessions that are led by our office in the city attorney's office. So the first, first there's the virtual orientation conducted, which covers everything from legal requirements like the Brown Act and Public Records Act to commissioner rules per the handbook, ethical expectations, social media guidance, and the city's code of conduct. Then once that's complete, new members move on to the BCC specific orientation. There would be kind of like a warm handoff between our departments and their specific departments, making sure that they are connected and then also alerting the departments that they are already basically able to move forward in the process and that all the requirements are met. And so this is coordinated by the BCC staff liaison and department heads. So for their orientation, it's focused on specific work of their commission. Most of it is the municipal code responsibilities, policies, upcoming work plan items, and procedural requirements unique to the BCC itself, including handling quasi-judicial matters. So throughout this process, city clerk staff provides direct support to each new member, guiding them step by step and connecting them with their designated staff liaison. So our report also includes the updated version of the handbook, which incorporates previous council action affecting boards and commissions. These updates include adjustment to their recruitment and work plan schedules, changes to the sizes of a few of the BCCs, such as the HRB, HRC, and PAC, updates on the candidate interview selection process, clarifications around remote attendance and training requirements, and some minor formatting and grammatical edits. So these changes, again, have already been approved by council and are just now reflected in the latest version of the handbook. So in closing, I just want to highlight that our goal is to ensure that every new BCC member feels welcomed, informed, and fully prepared to serve. We believe these updates create a more inclusive, efficient, and transparent process that supports both commissioners and the important work that they do for our community. But of course, we're always looking for ways to improve or streamline our processes in our departments. So any feedback from the committee tonight is certainly welcomed.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you very much. the boards and commissions are such an important role in our city. Yes, we're not reviewing the handbook and making any changes there. We're just looking at the onboarding process. So really appreciate you walking us through that. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have any requests to speak on item 2.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, comments, questions?
Thank you. I think this looks good. I just had a couple of thoughts, kind of, well, just sort of extensions of what's already there. One item that was useful for me on the Planning and Transportation Commission was just having several one-on-one meetings with current commission members as I was onboarding. Perhaps there's something in the chair expectations where the chair is actually expected to do some onboarding for new members, to get a coffee, to chat through some examples and issues, and just be a welcoming resource.
Yeah.
I think that'd be nice to formalize an expectation, or otherwise think of like what a buddy program kind of could look like in a way that doesn't really need any staff intervention, but just can be a norm that boards and commissions follow. One other process that is actually beyond the handbook, but I think still worth talking about, is a survey or some sort of recurring touch point to get feedback from the board and commission members. I know I believe there's at least one demographic survey that maybe Chantal, you ran, and making that a regular process, hopefully in a low effort way that can just be kind of rescheduled and sent, but also including some questions like, meetings are efficiently run, like 0 disagree, 5 strongly agree. I make an impact on the city. People value my opinion. The staff is responsive to the board and commissions.
Right.
Like just having, maybe 5 questions that take 10 seconds each to answer and think about would be useful to track. And this could be anonymized or whatever, but I think it'd just be interesting to see maybe half over half, maybe year over year, how board and commission members are feeling. So those were my thoughts overall. I think this looks great.
Thank you for that.
Thanks for this. As a former commissioner myself, I remember parts of the onboarding process that was really helpful, and other areas where I felt like I wish I had more training, more experience. I completely agree with George. I think the chair should have a really formal role, and I think that should be formalized. I mean, I was fortunate that my chair, when I joined the HRC, reached out and had coffee with me and kind of explained both what kind of the formal role of the commission, but also the other type of work that maybe staff is not going to share. So I think that's really important. And I would always do my best when I was chair to be able to do that as well for new members. So I think they should take on a more formal role. I think the one thing that's missing from the training, I mean, I was glad to see of course, Brown Act, important. I remember getting training on that. Great that public records requests and kind of the understanding of how broad that can be is critical. So I'm glad we're getting that training. I didn't see any Robert's Rules of Order or other type of kind of training on how to conduct yourself in a meeting. So I think that would be really helpful. And and I think also we just need training on two, and maybe this comes from the chair, but like the role of really explaining the role of the commission as an advisory board. I think there's a lot of commissioners, and I've had conversations with active commissioners
Mhm.
on this topic about not really understanding what their role is. I know we as council members have kind of struggled about what's our role as liaisons to
Mhm.
commissions. I think it is, of course, it's a bit about what you make of it, but I think really kind of explaining that advisory role and how to be an effective advisor would be additions. So don't want to make it overly burdensome and complicated, but I think a formal training on Robert's Rules of Order is key, and then maybe just incorporating some of that other stuff in there. Like best practices. Like I have both seen and heard complaints from commissioners about cell phone use in meetings of commissioners who are just kind of on their cell phones and not really as engaged or as respectful to their colleagues. And so I think just kind of going over those best practices and expectations would be helpful. But overall, I think this process is a great improvement, and seems like it has been working because we've been getting really great commissioners who have been hitting the ground running. So I think a lot of that is thanks to the work that the clerk's office has been doing to improve it. So
Thank
those
you.
are my thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Ms. Reyes, for the presentation and also for the work that the clerk's office does on this. I echo my colleagues on this. And it's interesting because there are some commonalities, and you outlined some of the common trainings, but then each of our commissions and boards are different one from another. Obviously their subject matter, but more than that, how they operate, how they interact with the other pieces of city government. So it's a little tricky to do a one size fits all with this. So the mayor and I recently, 2-3 weeks ago, I guess it was, had a meeting with the chairs and vice chairs of the boards and commissions. We invited them all, and quite a few came, and they were very happy to have the meeting, I can report. And so I took the opportunity to invite them to give me any feedback about onboarding. And it was interesting because there was a variety of tenures amongst them. So some of them were relatively new, and some of them had been on a board or a commission for quite a long time. So their memory of the onboarding process differed a lot. And it also seems like it has evolved over the years. So this is partly based on what they went through themselves and partly based on what they've seen newer commission members do. But it's interesting because it echoes some of what the council members on the committee have said. But one that was slightly different, which is interesting, both council members Stone and Liu mentioned the chairs participating in the orientation of new members. Well, what the chairs said there was they want their own orientation for how to be a chair.
Oh.
And so that was very interesting. They said, we don't really know now what's our authority, what are we supposed to do, and so I thought that was interesting because there's a lot of head nodding and echoing of that. And really it was, I think, focused on meeting management was called out in particular. And some of them were saying, maybe it's been a little while since they had the Brown Act backgrounder and they wanted a little refresher on that. So that was kind of interesting. They had mentioned, one of them mentioned that I guess that Cal Cities had provided some commissioner training, and whoever had gone to that found it very valuable. So I don't know how expensive or where one goes, or if it's virtual or live, but that was interesting. And they had some, because the focus of that meeting was more, how do you feel about your interaction with council? Too little, too much, what can we do so that you can feel fulfilled in your roles and perform an important role? But they did have a lot of questions around what is the appropriate level of cooperation with other parts of city government, including us. So that could be baked into the onboarding. Some of them had questions about what exactly is our authority, and that would differ probably body to body substantially. But they said, what are the limits of it? What can we do? What can't we do? Some of our they would say some of the members seem to think we could do more than perhaps we can. Sometimes we're just, just advisory, just suggestive. So that was interesting. Just, I think it was really a search for clarity was kind of the through line on this. There was also a mention of, could we provide more information about that, about what we can and can't do to the public, so that they're not asking us to do things or expecting things of us that perhaps are outside our scope. They did mention that they thought there was strong staff support. So that came through well. So I wanted to make sure you heard that staff is constantly reaching out, and they appreciated that and we're grateful for it. Yeah, and here's just another one that was also, what is within my authority, and added, it would be helpful to understand sort of the overall city governance structure. So I think they're just struggling to really understand their place. So it was less about the subject matter. It was more about, so now I'm a commissioner, what exactly can I do? But it was interesting because they all seemed excited to serve, motivated to keep serving. And like my colleagues, I think that's a good reflection on staff support for what they do. So that's their feedback through me.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So all good feedback. So just to clarify, my office is involved in both phases of onboarding. So what you've mostly heard about is the one size fits all the issues that are common to all the commissions, like the obligation to ensure non-discrimination, those kinds of things, Brown Act. Then there is commission-specific training that's done by the department. It can't be seated in the clerk's office because it involves the specific statutory authorities in our local charter and municipal code, the state law that pertains to some of the work that these commissions do. And it does vary quite a bit what their role is. Some of them do a lot of quasi-judicial work. So they review projects, and there are additional requirements, procedural requirements that are very important that they need to follow that don't pertain at all to commissions that are purely in the policy space. So there is that second level of training, and the comments that the three of you have made tonight, I think, are helpful in refining both levels, but just wanted to reassure you that that is happening.
That is very helpful. If we hear from a given commission member that they have these questions, to whom do we refer them?
So I think the model is that the first place to go is the staff support person for that commission. And that's often the department director or assistant director. And that person can work with my office if there is a legal issue, but most often, those questions can be addressed by the staff support liaison.
That makes great sense.
And we do understand that there are a lot of questions about role. That has come up for some commissions quite a bit in the last couple of years. So staff is continually trying to address and respond to those questions. People apparently still feel they have them. So it's also helpful, I think, for them to hear what the council's expectations are. And then the last comment is that I think that we did do a chair and vice chair training at some point. Okay, you recall that? Maybe it's time to do it again, or can you provide some detail?
Yes, we did provide a mayor chair training in 2021. So at least we have a foundation and a baseline that we could continue that on.
That's great. But yes, there's probably just a lot of new chairs, but that's terrific. And what I would reflect to project my own experience onto them. When I was getting trainings as a new council member, it was just so much that I couldn't take it all in, that I'm sure I'm sure you trained me on stuff that I did not retain. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have some of the same issues. So they may have a question that you had answered that has come up again. Because sometimes when you live into it, then you can contextualize all of these rules and things. And then you're like, oh, now I get it. And you hear it differently. So yeah, I think that knowing that they can making clear they can access staff, and then through staff, your office, and that that's okay and encouraged, it would be very helpful too. Thank you. None of them, well.
I was pretty lost.
I didn't understand these buttons on the first night. I mean, I gotta tell you, that it's seriously like, because some of them sit here, like literally you get sworn in there and you're like worried, you don't want to fall down or say something wrong. And you get up here and you're like, if I push these, does like something bad happen? And then how you even ring in, literally how you even ring in to speak, we didn't know. And so I'm like, do I raise my hand? What do I do? So those silly kind of, what may seem silly logistic things really take people's nerves down too. I think does the assistant city manager have a reflection on this now? Okay.
Yeah. I do think it speaks to just that recurring nature and working with the staff liaison over time, and the questions on role also. I think those come up as an ongoing thing as you're serving on the commission. Sometimes it's ideas when you first come in, and then you see some of the items that come to your commission, and then you have questions of, let me think more about how my commission is supposed to act on this. So I think the work plan discussions for each commission each year is a really good opportunity for them to refresh that, and also a good opportunity for council to provide some expectation setting with the commissions of just where you're hoping that they go in that year. And then, of course, the staff liaison for ongoing additional assistance.
That's excellent. Yes. And perhaps during the onboarding, encouraging them like later in their service tenure, if they have additional questions, to not be shy. So.
Sure. And Chair, I guess I will add, the other piece of this is also, as accessible as staff is, we also still apply the same, I'll say kind of research 1 hour rules, which is a learning curve, frankly, as we're trying to manage both the questions that are going to as staff coming from council committees, but also the commissions. And so managing that influx of requests for information, research, a meeting to talk about something, we do try and stay consistent in how we treat the additional staff resources.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that makes good sense too. And you never know if sometimes answering something early can save more work later, or if it's just going to lead to a bigger thing. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Other comments from my colleagues? No? And on this one, we don't need a vote of any sort, or?
Thank you so much. We'll certainly be implementing a lot of the suggestions. We do have our fall recruitment that is occurring right now, and we have
Yes.
like quite a few openings, and we've been very fortunate to have a lot of incumbents. They've been, I want to say, not necessarily easy to train. We do invite them if they ever did want to come in for like a refresher. Most of them probably get the hang of it already, but we're pretty much excited to implement these suggestions as the onboarding happens probably towards end of October, early November. So it will be a different experience.
Great, great. Well, hopefully this will help inform that, and they'll have a good experience. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move to our third and final item. Discussion of city council referral to review a schedule of repeat items that occur annually on agendas for PNS, finance, and council.
Good evening, everyone. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager, joined by the clerk's team. Very excited to have them here for this item. Similar to the last item, this is a referral that came from City Council with a desire to have this committee just look at some of the things that are done right now and make any suggestions. Particularly, this item in front of you has to do with items that we know come to City Council, Finance Committee, and Policy and Services Committee each year. We provided a very small text attachment related to the items that come to City Council annually. As you know, the council also sets your priority objectives early, like probably the first quarter each year. And so there are additional items that staff is then trying to program into the City Council agenda as well as committee agendas. Those items are not reflected here because they may be something that will later be ongoing, but at the time of assignment, they are typically unique to that year or the year after. For the Finance Committee, which is the following attachment, I believe attachment B, There are things related to budget and other items that regularly come before that committee. And then for policy and services, which is attachment C, our list of recurring items is shorter because we typically get the items that come from the priority objectives. But nonetheless, the intention here is just to be able to look at this list, discuss it if there are suggestions. I know part of the interest with having the committee look at this is seeing if there are ways that maybe we can try to optimize the council schedule a little bit more. And I know there are things we can do in that regard and also some limitations. And so we're here available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have any requests to speak.
Shocking. All right. I'm going to turn to our longest serving council member because you probably have the best lens into this. So do you have any thoughts or comments?
Well, just one clarifying question. So that list doesn't show, it's not just action items. It's like all items. So a lot of that comes on the consent calendar. Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen a list that's a little more focused on here's action items because I don't think yes, it's bad practice to have long consent calendars, and we do tend to have those, especially near the summer break or near our winter recess. But I don't think that's the real spirit of this item. It's more about how can we not have really full agendas and multiple special meetings at times of the year, then other times of the year where it's relatively light. So I've always found it frustrating and maybe just not understanding how important it is to get certain items done before we go into a summer recess. So, I mean, we only really take 6 weeks off. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that comes to us in June that it wouldn't be the end of the world if it came to us in August, because it just always seems like we are so swamped mid-May till our recess in June. And then we come back in August and September is always pretty light. And obviously there's exceptions to that, but that just seems to be the general cadence on this council every year that I've been here. So I'd love for us to really look at this harder as an organization when we're looking at the agendas in May and June and see what really is timely and what can be delayed. So I think that's the biggest piece here. And then kind of November, December can feel like that way too. So it just always kind of feels a bit frustrating to go through August and September and kind of looking back and go, wow, those agendas were pretty light. And then we just get slammed right before the holidays. So would love to examine that closer. And I don't think I'm in a place to really look at this massive list. It's kind of amazing how much we have to do every year, but so yeah, hard to look at this and go, oh, this can be moved here. I think that's your better judgment. Those are just my reflections. And then kind of looking through policy and services, I do kind of feel like sometimes it just feels like we're having just like a lot of audit reports that I don't know. I feel like we can dispatch those fairly quickly. I mean, I think we're fortunate to have a really good auditor that creates really good reports. We don't have too many. I don't think we typically have too much discussion around those. So sometimes that just kind of seems like it's maybe taken up a little too much. I do think maybe we should re-examine our policy about having, because I assume it's a policy, right, Molly, as far as no consent for a committee.
I
No, there's no
haven't
consent calendar.
thought about how consent would work for a committee, because I think that the committee is only hearing things that need some discussion. Are there exceptions to that? Maybe the audit work is something that does come here that doesn't have a specific referral from council
Right,
for
that's what I mean is
deep
more for
dive.
that.
That's interesting.
because there were times, I mean, and not today, but there have been times definitely with audit reports where I just kind of feel like, because I'm one of 3 members and it is policy and services and it is an action item, that I feel like I need to engage at some level, but not great questions that's really, I think, moving us along. And so maybe for some, it would make sense to have it as a consent, and then the rule could just be if one person wants to pull it, fine, we pull it and we have the discussion. But maybe something to examine, because I agree, that's the only time I see it being working would be for like audits.
Why don't we take that as a discussion that
Okay.
the staff should have with the auditor and the city manager's office and come back to you with some further thoughts.
Sounds good, thanks. And then, I mean, it feels like we're always doing legislative updates and legislative guidelines. How helpful are those? I don't know. So it just feels like that does take up a lot of time. Like, do we need to have legislative updates in April and in August? It's helpful. I don't know. And I think okay, sorry. And then legislative guidelines review, it's November or December, so that one doesn't come up twice.
That one's annual.
And then where's my least favorite one here? Council procedures and protocols handbook review. That is my least favorite part of every year. And so I'd love that to not come back as a coal in my stocking in December every year, but it's there.
You can pick a different month. Just kidding.
Yeah. I don't know why we need to revisit it every single year. Maybe just if there is a need or referral or whatnot, but I feel like we waste too much time on it.
Councilmember, hear you on that. Couple things. I think one, it is in the handbook, so you could change that.
It's in the handbook that we revisit the handbook. I hate this.
Yes, it's a whole section on it.
But the other thing is that is a good example of something that we could change the timing of. You know, some of the things on the calendar, when you look at it, that have to go, say, in May or June, you know, you have to adopt a budget, you have to adopt your rates, you have to adopt your fees. And so usually you want the most current information, so you're going to push it as close to your July 1 fiscal year date. But something like this, you could absolutely change from, say, if you already feel the crunch in November and December, we can change it to a different time frame.
Okay, well, I can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could get rid of it. You could get rid of it.
Well, okay, I mean, I guess there is purpose behind it,
The only
but
thing
let's
I
not
will,
do December.
the only thing I will add, no advocacy in any direction, is a good example is in 2024, it was chosen by the committee to actually not do a handbook review because we had done such extensive work on the handbook for months, which I think is partially why you're jaded right now, Councilmember Stone. But as an example, that was a decision that the council made. And so that could be a recommendation from this committee when you're looking at the handbook this year is for it to be every other year, because if there's not anything to talk about there, it definitely isn't a reason to bring it.
I may just jump in on this one because then we can see if George has anything on this, just to keep it cogent. That Deputy City Manager, that's what I was thinking as I was listening to this, is that unless there's a referral, there's like something they want us to deal with. I think dealing with it in the first year after an election is good, because that way every new class of council member, or maybe the second year, so people are played in a little more and have had a chance to kind of operate. But once every 2 years would give each new group of council members a chance to weigh in. But yeah, doing it every year unless there's a reason seems excessive to me. I don't know, George, do you have any different thoughts or additional thoughts on this issue?
Not really. I mean, on the council handbook, it's fine, you know. We can, I haven't
Oh, you
actually
haven't been
done
through
it,
it.
but
Oh,
like,
you don't know.
but can't we just get to a motion quickly on stuff like that? Does it?
Well, I was part of the slowdown on that, I have to
Okay.
say. I read it carefully and
Okay.
If I might
it made
jump
it a
in.
little painful for some of my colleagues, so they don't want me doing that every year is kind of what I'm hearing, but I don't want to do it every year, so.
And if I might jump in, we did an entire rewrite of the handbook. So that was
Right,
when
right.
Councilmember Vanker or Chair Vanker came in. That is typically not the level of scrutiny we provide to the document. It had been a Frankenstein over a really long time. And that was our way of really trying to make it a more useful document. So this year will be our first time soliciting the council members for suggestions. I have this one, which I will include in that staff report. And then we will bring that to the committee and ask, do you have any other changes that you want to recommend? And that's what we forward to the full council. So that it is supposed to be a faster item, but this last time it took about 6 meetings, 3 here and 3 at council, and that is not typically the norm.
Thank you for that reminder. I was trying to remember why it was so painful. Yep.
No, I like the idea of timing it so that so that way new council members have a year with it. Otherwise it makes very little sense. And then, sorry, I just kind of spoke at you, but I would like to get feedback on this idea of we pack agendas going into recesses and then they're fairly light afterwards. Is that something that staff thinks, yeah, we can actually work to balance that a little better? Or is that just the nature of city business and there's really not much that we can do?
I am also going to tag Assistant City Manager Noze in this answer. I think there are a few things that are happening, and then I can speak to June versus the December timeframe. For June, it is the end of the fiscal year, as well as time before summer. And so that does impact the amount of things that are coming to council, just because some things do have to be adopted before the fiscal year is over, or we want to start that work while council is on recess in the summer. So that is sometimes why you have some of those heavier agendas in June. And then for December, I think some of what happens is you end up with the holiday period after the council's on break, and you also end up with the early January time period where we typically can't bring items because the reorganization meeting, et cetera. And in both cases for items coming in August as well as January, staff does try to take some time away when council is away. And that impacts the ability for us to also produce all of the reports that would be necessary for those early meetings. So there's a combination of things I think that are happening, and I'll let Ms. Noze add from there.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. I think the other aspects of this are also just the timelines and goal orientation. You look at our council priorities. We've got quarterly targets that we're trying to meet in terms of completing those priority objectives. And so, staff is doing their best to adhere to those quarterly timeframes. And if not quarterly, in terms of that Q2, obviously ending in June, because the council priorities are obviously on a calendar year basis, they're all, by goodness gracious, trying to get them done before the end of that, December timeframe in advance of the council's retreat. So there is some self-infliction of it as we're trying to continue to move progress. And as it moves through all the BCCs, right, if you kind of think about some of the planning projects or even some of the other ones that are moving through PNS or through Finance Committee, say it starts in March as we're kind of moving through the council priority setting session, and then we're trying to get it done in the next 9 months, naturally you hit that November, December timeframe. So I think that's just another aspect of it. And I would say that one we probably have more control over, obviously, since those are our priority settings and the goals associated with them.
Yeah, that all makes sense and understand we're going to have some things that we just have to get done. And I think we can all accept that June is especially going to be busy, and it's easier to have that sprint to the finish line knowing we've got a break. I just think though we can do a better job really trying to look at what truly can wait until, again, just 6 weeks. I think we can do, because there are definitely, I can't think of specific examples right now, but I know there are definitely times where I'm looking at an agenda in June going, really, this can't wait, or we don't get to it, and then we say, okay, we're going to just kick it off, and then all of a sudden we're having it in August or September, and it was clear we always could have. So maybe we could just examine them a little better moving forward, but thanks for that context. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you. That was actually quite helpful to have your perspective on that. George, do you have anything? Or
I don't have too much to add, just some quick notes. Maybe we could start the budget just a few weeks earlier. I don't know if that makes sense. Just do that first study session and unjam June a little bit. On light months, I'm still not totally sure which months are actually consistently light, but there are things like the independent police auditor or the study session we had on San Francisco Creek. Maybe the SCAP study session doesn't have to happen in conjunction with Earth Day, but could happen in August. I don't know. So like those kinds of things, I think could make sense to shift to meet Councilmember Stone's concerns and experiences, which I'm sure I'll share soon.
excellent, thank you. This has actually turned out to be quite more enjoyable than I thought this was going to be, listening to you and thinking through this. I think with the ledge updates and guidelines, yes, the guidelines kind of need to be once a year because things are evolving all the time, but they don't need to be more than that. The ledge updates, it's kind of like you need to know what's coming, what's hot this year, and then you need to know what's actually happening before it's too late. So it's kind of a tricky thing to decrease, I think. But one of the things I actually don't understand, and perhaps this group could explain it to me, is if we're sort of like the place of first resort on sort of the policy thinking, can do a deeper dive, have a little more bandwidth to go into the legislative updates and such. Sometimes we're asked to vote on positions on certain things, and sometimes it goes straight to council. And I know that I think we're actually going to take this up perhaps in some way. I don't know if that's, they're the protocols, right? But I guess the thing is, how do you figure that out? And are we going to get a chance to kind of revisit that?
There's a few pieces to that. So the discussion on the timing of it, I think, is going to be in your legislative manual discussion, which we're bringing to this committee in October. Is that what you're referring to on that piece?
Yes, and yes, exactly. The legislative manual, I think, is the how we go about taking positions on certain things. So, yeah.
Yes, and we've done different iterations of our legislative program over the years. And so I think the current iteration is we're bringing more of it to policy and services for those two discussions. If there are decisions made here or disagreements on any particular bill, then that is something that we would send to council. Or if there were actions that were beyond our legislative guidelines and we wanted council to confirm those actions, we would send it to council on consent if it were unanimous here. We haven't had to do that this year. This committee has mostly agreed with the things that align with our legislative guidelines, and we've been able to act on things relatively easily. I do think it's worth us thinking about just how we update the full council on some of those same legislative updates. If there is agreement here, maybe we take that as an informational item to council, or it can be a consent item. I think we're open to suggestions. We have not gone straight to council on most things except for the bill sponsor one, which was a little bit of an anomaly this year.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I do think now that I'm reminded that we do have this legislative manual discussion coming up, that would be a good time to talk through that in more detail. The audit on consent is an interesting idea, and I'll be curious to see what staff comes back with after you have a chance to kind of ponder it more fully. I would just observe that from what I've observed in reviewing the audits is that it seems like by far and away, the most important thing that happens is that auditor staff interaction and discussion. And, perhaps something to consider is if there were significant disagreements between the auditor and those being audited about either what's being reported in the audit or the action items going forward, then perhaps it comes to us to hear more about. But generally, that hasn't been the case. It's been really interesting. I mean, most of the audits have been very positive. And when there is a suggestion, usually staff agrees and or does something similar or is already doing something similar. And so that's there. I haven't seen an instance where what I just described is necessarily the case, but pondering things like that, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts since you've done a lot more of these audits as to when and if we need to see all of them. So on the May and June being, heavy and can we delay things? March is kind of a lighter area. And I wonder if this is, I think maybe a bit aspirational, but let me just toss it out there to help with sort of smoothing out the workload. If in council referrals and our priorities, we aimed for things to be scheduled in those lighter periods, like avoiding the May-June budget time. And somehow, I don't know, somehow blessed it, the putting off of the one-offs for those heavier months, that might help staff, but of course, everyone's going to always have their one thing they want to see done right now. But if we had an expectation as a council that the newer items we add are going to avoid that pre-vacation budget crunchy time period, that might help smooth things out a little bit, just if we were cognizant of that, as the expectation levels were slightly different. But one thing I did want to ask about, and I think Deputy City Manager, you alluded to it a little bit ago, is sort of this year-end, year-start dynamic, because I always feel like we lose a lot of time there. And we've talked a little bit about how do we do that, especially if we're swearing in new members, and it's tricky with new mayors, and then you have new committee assignments and new chairs, and so how do you do things? But I think, I don't know, somehow I feel like if we could smooth that out a bit, I'm not saying more meetings, don't worry, I'm not going to impinge on our holidays, but somehow if the committees could get up and running and or that priority setting work that council does somehow happened a little earlier so that we could help smooth it out, that would be helpful, I think. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but every year I kind of feel like, we're mostly through Q1 and we're asking you to give us a spreadsheet of what you're going to do in Q1. And we've just told you what that is. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how we can smooth out that year-end, year-start piece, or want to ponder that.
The year-end piece, I think, to your point, when we're setting up the quarterly goals associated with the priorities, like you said, just even being more cognizant if we say something is going to be done in Q2, either, just acknowledging we likely won't have capacity to get it until Q3 versus Q2, and creating that just awareness in how we mark it off as when it will be done kind of thing. The holiday year-end timeframe, or calendar year-end timeframe. Sorry, I'm getting my fiscal year ends and calendar years blurry in my brain. That one is a little bit more interesting, and I think we all would need to think about it a little bit more because of the transition of mayor, vice mayor, as well as new electeds on those elected years. And so, we are about as far as staff can go in terms of the prep work it takes to put the priority setting session together and having it, at the end of January, early February, but then for us to move it up, we would need to know some of those pieces, I think, earlier. So I think that piece needs more thought in terms of the council transition.
Yeah, I think one of the ideas that I'm now remembering, and I think it's awkward, so it didn't really go anywhere, was, and I'll just take the climate committee as an example, because I think that's where it came up and we discussed it last year, was we were sort of right in the middle of a few things, and it's December, early December, and we know we're not really going to revisit it till early February. That's rough. You feel like you lose a couple months of momentum. And so the question was, if it's not an election year and you have at least the same people around, could that committee composition carry over so you could have a meeting in late January, after we're back in business, without necessarily having to wait so long? And then when the mayor appoints the new committee members, then it would shift. So I think that was a question. Could we avoid losing, 2 months out of the 11 that were here? And so again, I don't necessarily need an answer right now, but that was a question.
Yeah, this is something that's totally up to council to decide how you want to organize that. My recollection is that this last year there was an as-needed approach that was taken, and there might have been 1 or 2 committees that maybe at least considered exercising that.
Yeah, I think we did talk about that, but I don't know that we actually ended up exercising it. The clerk might remember if we did, but that it would be interesting, because if we could make that work just to smooth out, it might not be such a rush for the early December and then such a backup by the time you get to February. You've got a really fat agenda. So that's interesting. If that's so there's no legal reason we can't. It's just a matter of staff has a lot of stuff in January.
Well, specifically with respect to the committees, so the way that the council has set itself up is that the mayor is chosen. I believe that might be in the charter, actually, the timing on that. And that then the mayor constitutes those new committees. But council could decide that it wants to use a little bit of a holdover rule for an interim period. While the mayor is, my understanding is it takes some time for the mayor to hear from council members about their interests and balance that against all the other factors and make some decisions. And then once you get those memberships, then you're looking for what are dates that work for people, et cetera.
Exactly. So I think a lot of it's then the calendaring and, and if there's ad hocs that come and go and all of that. So it just takes a while to get set up again. And meanwhile, we lose time where maybe we could have an extra meeting that's, to just make the ones on either side a little lighter. So.
Sure. And I think, there's setting that as a policy where the committees continue to meet regardless, as the current policy sets in that January, extending it past December to January, or simply enabling that ad hoc usage as needed. I do remember we enabled that back when we were doing ballot measures for the election. We needed continuity of the finance committee at that time because we were running against frankly, an election time clock. And 2, we couldn't miss a month, basically. We were pumping out work every 2 to 4 weeks actively. And so we chose at that time. And so I think that's the thing to think about is, would you want it as a mandatory or an option? And this is the provision that you would enact as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely tend toward the permissive. And the question is, whose permission? Is the committee itself authorized to do that? Could we set a structure like that?
It's for council to decide how you want to do that.
So it would be in your
Yes,
handbook.
but could council say that the committee could extend a month? Or would it have to do it each time? And would council have to bless it each time, I guess is my question.
No, you could set it up so that it could be exercised by the committee chair.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's what I was hoping you would say. Interesting. All right, well, I've taken a long time here. Let me just wrap with saying.
And maybe that would go in the handbook.
Oh. Okay, you get points for that. So I do agree with Councilmember Stone that like, I appreciate this list because you can look at it and just see, there's so many in some months and less in others. But sort of separating out what was consent or not, I think would be interesting to see. Hopefully that wouldn't be a big task. I would actually be interested in having that at a future, I don't know, just in a future, maybe informational report or something. But also, even for the action items, there's big ones like the budget, and there's small ones like weed abatement, right? And so, those are wildly different in terms of time. And I don't know if you could even just have a 2-tier thing or something. Just, it would be helpful, I think, to get a sense of the heft of a given month of routine stuff. Anyway, those are my comments. Do you have additional ones after all my chatter up here? Nope.
No.
Okay. George, no? Well, I really appreciate you doing this work because I think reflecting on it could hopefully make it a better process for all of us and ultimately the city. Anything else from staff that you want to suggest or say to us about this?
I'll just take the opportunity because you opened the floor to let the committee as well as the public know, like, sort of the time frame it takes to put together staff reports. I think that's something that's not always cognizant outside of our staff wheelhouse. And so just like to share that we publish staff reports 11 days before a meeting for both council and committees. And then there's at least a 2-week review period before that internally, depending on how in-depth the department does, which could be another 2 additional weeks from there. So just as context, when we are setting an agenda item, we're really looking at a month to a month and a half from the time of the idea of a report all the way to getting that report published and then to you. And so I just think it's helpful information to keep in mind where we want to give you the quality work that you're looking for with the information that allows you to have a good, robust discussion and make good decisions. And so I think that process is important to keep in mind.
I appreciate that. And that doesn't even necessarily include the work to generate the information that goes into the report.
Absolutely.
So I have a comment too, and thank you for asking for this opportunity for input. When I see this recurring items for city council consideration, it's quite lengthy. It had to be printed in tiny print. And I just wonder whether anyone has been asked and maybe should be asked whether there are any items on here that are in fact not needed. And because all of these, although they may not receive a lot of focus from council, they're typically informational items. They do take staff time to produce. And if we're doing work that's no longer adding value, maybe there could be things that we could retire.
Thank you for suggesting that. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, like, without creating a lot more work, how we might follow. I feel like there's a lot of good ideas that have been generated, and I don't want to make a big thing, but I think it might be worth another look. So I don't.
Vice Mayor Vinker?
Yes.
I do have whether the items are consent, action, or informational. I did not include it on the attachment because I wanted it to be legible.
Fair enough.
But perhaps that might be a good starting point to City Attorney Stump's point about whether all these action items are needed. We could start by saying, well, what's action, what's consent, what's informational?
That'd be great. And you could even just, color them and then the font could say the same or something, but that would be helpful.
I think it's worth looking at the informational items as well, because those were things that people wanted to ask for at some point. Some may be legally required, but there may be some that they do take staff time to produce and they may no longer be needed.
No, I'm glad you raised that also because I always see them there and I think, I'm going to come back and read that. That looks really interesting. And I will confess, I don't always get that done. So yes, we should make sure that it's a valuable thing.
I think the most notable and like highest volume ones seemingly are usually the ASD different investment reports or sales tax or various financial reports, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually. I don't think we get too much out of that. I think if there's some notable change in the city's finances, that should just be in the city manager comments or through some other venue. So at least those could be consolidated, maybe even semi-annually. Like, yeah, I mean, sales tax is nice to have, but like, that might be the only exception.
Well, I assume we track all these, so I'm curious what the assistant city manager says about putting them in that form, because I don't know if they're otherwise, I assume they're otherwise public somewhere, somehow, or, no?
I mean, some are. So some of these, to Attorney Stump's points, are required by some statutory codes. But many of them are things that we have reported out on, and the frequency of them in alignment with council's desires.
Since the committee seems open to it, maybe a first step would be that for the people who generate this to offer their thoughts about whether a more streamlined version, less frequent, or whether it's really outdated what they're doing. They might be able to easily identify some items that are not of significant value.
Yes, thank you. I hesitate to ask staff to do more, but I actually would invite you to, one, give us the chart of the recurring items with the action versus consent. And then if you, even within action, have kind of a big, small, I mean, that's arbitrary, but you know, there's a feel for it. And then for the informational items too, if there are ones you think aren't as timely as they were at the time of request, or just you have learned are tremendously more burdensome to create, and so do we really want them? I would be very willing to take a look at that.
And I'll just say that we appreciate the committee's feedback on what you find useful versus not useful. That helps inform us as we staff go back. We can look at, you know, what's required statutorily, what's more discretionary, and help marry those two points of information.
So how do we step through this? Do we need to agendize or can we even do that? Yes.
Yes, we can just bring this item back at a subsequent meeting. We'll work with the clerk's office to do that follow-up on color coding or whatever might be the easiest reading version of the action versus consent versus informational items, and come up with suggestions of where we may be able to consolidate some of the items and or our recommendations for items maybe we no longer think is providing as much value as they previously did.
That would be great. I think you have a consensus on this committee that we would appreciate working together with you on that, just to make it more efficient for everybody, all the staff and the council. So thank you.
Awesome.
Anything else from anyone? I guess not. Okay. Future meetings and agendas? Deputy City Manager, do you?
Yes, give me just 1 minute.
Sure. Greer will dance in the meantime to distract us.
Wow.
We're the fun committee tonight.
What a show. We not going to reference the handbook yet, but it will come in December. We are looking for an additional meeting potentially in October. I do think that the volume of work that's coming to your committee is lengthy, similar to the conversation that we just had. The items that I know we are looking to do in October are the fair chance in housing ordinance. That's a referral follow-up from council. 2 auditor reports, one related to building permit and inspection fees, one related to community services department equipment and materials inventory, assuming all those pieces come together to make that report. Also, the nonprofit work plan and the legislative manual. So it is a lengthy amount of things as part of the reason we want to try to split that up into 2 meetings if possible.
Right. We had discussed that. Perhaps we would have the 2 audits and the fair chance ordinance in one, and a nonprofit partnerships, which I'm eager to revisit. There's a lot. It's kind of a big issue in many ways, but I think that's something that we are well situated to address. And the ledge manual, as we just discussed. So right now we're scheduled for the 15th, is that right? No.
Yes, it is.
No, that's
It was
14th.
October 14th.
Right, and that's the one where I cannot attend, and so I asked Councilmember Stone if he would kindly chair, and he said he would. But we need a second date in addition to that is the idea. And I think, did you polled us, is that right? Did I respond?
Yes, I sent out an initial email. I'll resend it so it pops up at the top of folks' inboxes.
Apologies, there's just so much scheduling going on right now. Is it worth, is there a date or two that staff is available in the space? Should we just talk about it? Or if you can remind us of the dates, we might be able to get you an answer.
Yes, happy to pull those up.
Also, could the audits or maybe even the ledge manual be deferred to a November meeting? Or I don't know if we already have
We
a
already have.
sense of a PAC November or PAC December as well.
Possibly is the short answer. We could move things around. There are a lot of items that are coming to the committee over the next couple of
Okay.
months. There are more items than there is time, realistically speaking. Some items can easily carry forward into the next year, not the handbook, but it could, as an example. But I think you have about anywhere between 4 to 6 items per upcoming meeting is what it's
Okay.
currently looking like, and it really depends on staff's ability to be able to produce those reports. And if they don't, then those items end up getting deferred a little longer.
Got it.
Yeah, so the deputy city manager keeps a list of all the referrals, and we meet at least once a month, usually twice a month, to go over what's coming up and how the reports are coming along and how they mesh with council and things. And it's a full list right now that we're trying to get done by the end of the year. Like I said, she just said some will probably get pushed. So that's why we were trying to do this, because I hate to have any extra meetings as well. But to try to get if we don't do all of these, then we have a pretty big backup at the next month. And it felt like a lot for one meeting to have 5 items when the nonprofit partnership was one of them. So that's why we wanted to break it into 2.
And I have the dates that we're looking for the second October meeting, if that's helpful.
Yes, please.
They are Thursday, October 23rd, Tuesday, October 28th, and Wednesday, October 22nd. We had also been looking at the 22nd, but that is no longer an option because there's now a city council meeting. And I think I just misspoke. It's Wednesday, October 29th is for second policy and services.
Okay, can you repeat those one more time?
October 23rd, October 28th, October 29.
I can do any of those.
I think I can do 29th and 30th.
It was 28 and 29.
Oh, sorry, 28, 29.
Yeah, I can do 28 or 29.
So looks like we do not have council on that Monday. So we wouldn't have back to back if we did the 28th, because that's always tough like this week. Yeah, so the 20th. So if the 28th is good for everybody, maybe we should just go ahead on the 28th.
And the intention there is to do the nonprofit work plan as well as the legislative manual. I will double check with the staff person for the nonprofit work plan just to make sure there's no
Sure.
issues there.
Okay.
I'm the staff person and Christine on the manual, so we'll be here either way.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Great, and thank you to my colleagues. Okay. Anything else we need to talk about on future meetings? Deputy City Manager, anything else we need to talk about on future meetings?
There's a lot of cool stuff coming up. Stay tuned.
Excellent. Well put. I'm not going to touch that. Excellent. All right. Well, I think we stand adjourned then. Thank you all.
We just do 28.
Yes.